Well, hello guys, welcome to another video. Today we're gonna be doing a little bit different type of video. I'm gonna be talking about the Nintendo 64 Classic that for sure is coming out. Everybody knows this week the PlayStation Classic was announced, and well, of course Nintendo is going to come back with a classic console, which is the N64. So today I want to introduce you to a new series that I'm working on. It's gonna be called The Bearded Gamer, obviously, and yeah, we're going to be talking about video games, video game news. Let me show you guys my collection, some reviews, walkthroughs, all the good stuff. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, and welcome to The Bearded Gamer. Alright guys, as I mentioned last week, I believe so, the PlayStation Classic was announced, and it said it was going to contain 20 games. And obviously everybody was so hyped up about the Nintendo 64 Classic that Nintendo kind of announced, but not really. They renewed their rights, I believe, for the copyrights for the controller. So everybody knows that that's what's going to happen eventually. Obviously, everybody's been doing their prediction list here on YouTube. Now, I came up with more than a prediction list. I made an analysis list, and I'll show you guys later on in a little table that I created on Excel. Now, what I did is I came up with a number of games that were going to be included. Now, on the PS1 Classic, they mentioned it's going to be only 20 games. Now, on the SNES Classic, there was 21 games. So coming up with the NES Classic, they had 30. They deducted 30% of their games. They brought it down to 21. If we keep doing the same math, I guess, if we deduct 30% from 21 games, we'll come up with 14.7 games, which I'll round it up to 15. So I believe the N64 is gonna do 15 games, no matter if the PlayStation Classic is doing 20. Again, Nintendo doesn't really care, and we've seen it before. Nintendo, even if their consoles are less powerful than the actual consoles like PS4 and Xbox, they don't really care about that. They don't really care about what other people are doing. So I believe even though the PS1 Classic contains 20 games, I believe the Nintendo 64 is gonna come up only with 15. So yes. Now with that said, about the console, I believe that the controller, and let me untie this because I haven't used it in a while. Now I believe that the controller is gonna be the same size, but I do believe that this section is gonna be removed. Now I have a theory why I believe the little connector from here is not going to be used at all on the on the N64 Classic. So they're just going to either shave this off and close it down, and I think they're going to include Rumble Pack inside of it. Now y'all guys remember we had a Rumble Pack for the controller. I believe that they're going to go ahead and shut this port down and include a Rumble Pack in the controller. I think they will save some money on this connector. I don't know, but that's just what I've been thinking. Now let's go to the games. I made a list of the games that appeared on the SNES and the NES Classic before, and I made a list of which games also reappeared on the Nintendo 64. So for example, let's start with the basic one, Mario. So on the NES, we had Mario 1, 2, and 3, correct? And then on the SNES, we had the Super Mario World. Now on the Nintendo 64, everybody knows we got Super Mario 64, which is a great game. So for that one, I'm 100% sure that they're going to include it. Now, The Legend of Zelda. On the NES, we had two games, The Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2, Link's Adventure. And on the SNES, we only had one game released from Zelda. It was A Link to the Past, and again, it was included on the SNES. Now on the Nintendo 64, we came back to releasing 2 games in a console, and that's Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Now I believe those 2 games are gonna be included on the Nintendo 64 Classic. Now we got Castlevania. Now in Castlevania, we had Castlevania 1 and 2, which I believe is called Simon's Quest. I'm not a big Castlevania fan. But then on the SNES, we have Super Castlevania 4. Now on the Nintendo 64, there was 2 Castlevania games released. Castlevania 64 and Castlevania something something. I'm not sure what the name of the game is, but again, there were 2 games released. Now I believe that they're gonna include one of those 2 games, and I think it's gonna be the most popular one. I'm not sure which one's going to be. Again, I'm not a big Castlevania fan, so I don't know which game made better money. But I think one of those 2 games are gonna be included. Now, coming down the list, I have Donkey Kong. Now, Donkey Kong was released on the NES Classic, the first one, and Donkey Kong Jr. Now, on the SNES, we had Donkey Kong Country. On the 64, we have Donkey Kong 64, which again was a great game. And I believe it's also going to be included on the Nintendo 64 Classic. On Final Fantasy, we saw Final Fantasy 1 on the NES. Final Fantasy 3 on the SNES, but on the Nintendo 64 there was no Final Fantasy game, so there's no game at all coming up for it, so obviously it's out of the list. Ghosts and Goblins, same thing. We had Ghosts and Goblins 1 on the NES and Super Ghosts and Goblins on the SNES. Again, on the 64 there was no Ghosts and Goblins, so again, therefore there's no Ghosts and Goblins on the N64 Classic. Kirby. Now Kirby, we had Kirby Adventure on the NES, which was the first game, and Kirby's Dream Castle or something like that, and Kirby's Superstar. I'm not sure about the second one that I said, but I know there was 2 games on the SNES with Kirby, and on the Nintendo 64 we had Kirby 64. Now I believe that Kirby is going to be on the Nintendo 64 Classic, following that pattern that on the SNES you got Kirby's Adventure, and then on the SNES you had 2 Kirby games. So for sure, I'm sure that that's going to happen. Now coming down the list, we got Metroid. On Metroid, we got Metroid 1 on the NES and on the NES Classic, Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo and on the SNES Classic. Now we didn't have any Metroid coming out for the Nintendo 64, so therefore there will be no Metroid on this list. Coming down, we got Mega Man. Mega Man was weird because we only had Mega Man 2 on the NES, Mega Man X on the SNES, and I'm mentioning the classic versions. And on the Nintendo 64, we have Mega Man 64, which not a lot of people talk about it. I liked it. I didn't own it. A friend of mine lent it to me one time. I played it for a week, and I really enjoyed it. But I haven't seen anyone talk about it now. As much as I want this game to be included on the N64 Classic, I don't think it's going to happen, and I'll explain you later why. Next, we got Contra. We had Super Contra on the NES and Contra 3 on the SNES. Now, there was a Contra that was going to release on the N64, but it got canceled. So again, there's no Contra 64. So therefore, there's not going to be one on the N64 Classic. Okay, so F-Zero. Now, F-Zero was a game that started on the SNES. We had F-Zero 1, and then on the Nintendo 64, we have F-Zero X. Now, I have a theory that great franchises that started on the SNES are going to jump into the N64 Classic. We have, for example, F-Zero and then Star Fox. Star Fox started on the SNES with Star Fox 1 and Star Fox 2, which was just released with the SNES Classic. Now, of course, Star Fox 64 was one of the greatest games for the console. A lot of people love it, and I'm 100% sure that it's gonna be included on the N64 Classic. Same thing, Mario Kart. Mario Kart was introduced on Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo. Mario Kart 64 was a great game. I loved it. I played a lot of hours in that game. A lot of people that love that game. And it's a great franchise. Right now they're on the 8th game, I believe. So As a matter of fact, I think that great franchises that started in the Super Nintendo are gonna go ahead and jump in the Nintendo 64 Classic. Another example is gonna be Yoshi. Yoshi, he didn't start it on the SNES, but his own game did start it on the SNES. We have Yoshi's Island, which was known as Super Mario World 2. After Yoshi's Island, we have Yoshi's Story. And Yoshi's Story is one of my favorite games. I played it like crazy. I had all the Yoshis, the white one, the black one, all of them. And I think that it's a game that for sure is going to be included on Nintendo 64 Classic because, again, it's a great game. And it's a great franchise that right now they're on the, what's the new one? It's a Woolly World and there's the Crafted World that's coming up. So yeah, again, I think it's a great game that is going to be included on it. Right next of it, we have Punch-Out. Now, Punch-Out was a game that was released on the NES. It had some different versions of it, some spin-offs. We got Super Punch-Out for the Super Nintendo, but there was no Punch-Out for the Nintendo 64, so therefore there won't be any of it. Dr. Mario. Now, with Dr. Mario, it's a little bit different. Dr. Mario was included on the first NES. But on the Super Nintendo, there was no Dr. Mario at all. We had a Tetris and Dr. Mario bundle on the Super Nintendo, but it was basically like a remaster of the classic games from the Nintendo system. So I don't consider it a Super Nintendo game. But again, on the Nintendo 64, we had a Dr. Mario 64 that was released. So remember when I said on Mega Man that I wish it was included, but I know that we're not going to. It was because I came down to this list with 14 games, and Dr. Mario and Mega Man were the last two. Now, I know that Nintendo is gonna go for their first party option rather than their third party option, which is Capcom with Mega Man. So, as much as I want Mega Man 64 to be included, I know it's not going to be, and I know for sure that it's going to be Dr. Mario 64. RPG Mario. Now, the RPG Marios started with Mario and the Legend of the Seven Stars. It didn't have a sequel, but indeed it started the saga of the RPGs with Paper Mario. So we have Paper Mario now, and it's a great franchise, following again the same theory that franchises that started on the SNES are gonna go ahead and jump in the Nintendo 64. Paper Mario was a great game. A lot of people loved it. I played it a little bit. I didn't own it. One of my friends had it, so I will play a little bit when I was at his house. I'm not a big RPG fan, but it was fun. So I believe that Paper Mario is gonna go ahead and be included on the Nintendo 64 Classic. Now, for the last three games, these are franchises that started with a Nintendo 64, and I believe they're great games. Obviously, they're right now there's a big fan base behind these games, and I believe they're gonna be included for sure on the Nintendo 64 Classic. The first one is Super Smash Bros. Everybody's going crazy for the new one that's coming up. Of course, they're gonna want to have a throwback of it on the N64 Classic, so for sure they're gonna include it. Mario Party. Now, with Mario Party, there's three games released on the Nintendo 64. It was Mario Party 1, Mario Party 2, and 3, correct? Now, I didn't own any of them. I played them with friends, but I did not play it by myself or in my house because I didn't have it. So I don't know which one is the best of them, but I've heard that the second one is the best Mario Party from the Nintendo 64 console. Now, I believe they're only going to include one from the Mario Party saga, and I believe it's going to be the most successful one. Now, that will be number 2, which it's what I've heard. I'm not sure, but I will include number 2 of Mario Party in that list. And last but not least, we got Pokemon. Now, a lot of people are thinking that Pokemon Stadium is going to be included, but I personally think that that's not what's going to happen now, because first of all, you need the transfer pack. The main reason why people play Pokemon Stadium was because they wanted to play their Pokemons from Pokemon Red, Yellow, and Blue on the big screen. Pokemon Stadium does not have a story mode or anything. It's mainly just fights. It's just like the fighting the champions or whatever was it, the stadiums, and I mean, if you don't have that, I don't think it's much as a fun game if you don't have your Pokemons from back in the day. So again, as I said, I think they're gonna reduce that connection from the controller. So I think that they're not gonna include Pokemon Stadium. Again, I don't think people still have the transfer pack. And if they do they still work? And do they still own their games, you know? So I'm not pretty sure that they're gonna go with that route. But I do think they're gonna include a Pokemon game. Now, a Pokemon game that it's awesome on the Nintendo 64 is Pokemon Snap. Now, I haven't heard a lot of love for this game. I don't know why. It's a rail-on shooter, but you don't really shoot. Well, you shoot with the camera, so I guess you're shooting. So you can throw apples at the Pokemon so they can do stuff, and you can take pictures of them. It's a pretty nice game. So I think that will be my option for the Pokemon series that they're gonna include on the Nintendo 64 Classic. Now, if you count all those games that I listed, we get a total of 15, as we mentioned before. So I believe that's what's going to be included on the N64 Classic. The one controller, because of the size of the box. If they want to keep this same size, if they want to keep this thing going on, I think it's only going to be one controller. I'm not sure if it's gonna fit one in the console. You know, they're pretty big. Maybe they'll reduce it a little bit. I'm not sure they want to do that, but if they want to keep the same size of box, that's the route that will go. So, what I think is gonna be included is the console, the HDMI cable, the power cord, the power block, one controller, and that's it. Again, I think they're gonna go ahead and take that connector off from here and kind of reduce it a little bit and add rumble feature to the controller. Now again, this is my prediction from my analysis. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I mean, looking at the history of what they've done with the other two classic consoles, I think that's what's going to happen. So we shall see. I hope I'm right. I wish they include the Mega Man 64, and I wish they include a lot of other games. This is not the list that I would want to be added to the Nintendo 64 Classic. This is more of a list that I think that is going to happen based on the history of what have they done. I wish they had Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Turok, a lot of other games that they're amazing, but again, licensing and all that stuff, it's not gonna happen. Alright guys, I hope you enjoy this new series that I'm about to start. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos, and I'll see you next time. Alright guys, if you like this video, hit that like button. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you want some more unboxing goodness, here's my latest video. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.